And that's why we create this podcast and create conversations and empower other women and other leaders and other people to be who they are and step up and lead the way that they can.
Mm-hmm. The recording's in progress. Hannah!
You don't really know a person. It can be a third date. It can be a fifth date until they look at your bookshelf and say they don't like Kendi.
And then you know it's a no match, because if I love Kendi and you don't like Kendi, it's just fundamentally not going to work.
Who would look at How to Be an Antiracist in combination with 400 Souls and the 1619 Project, look at it, make a face, and then that not like they expect that to get past me?
Mm.
Not to seem forward, but sir, who did you vote for and where were you on January 6th? I am no longer going out with this person.
It's just, I mean, like I was telling you, it just snuck up on you. There was no way to know until that moment where you were like, whoa, you have a problem with my book?
If that person had a problem with my books, they definitely have a problem with this podcast and they're never going to hear it. So peace out, buddy.
Deuces.
So that was my week so far. How are you?
You know, certainly not as eventful, but I did enjoy our readings. So I didn't tell you what I read. LOL. So we're going to discover this today. But I did enjoy my reading for this week from Hood Feminism by Mikki Kendall. It was fantastic and definitely very introspective, which was really nice.
Mm-hmm. And like, it's March. It is International Women's Month or Women's History Month or whatever. Things
I
like
think
that.
both. Yeah.
Yeah. It's also social work. It's also International Social Work Day.
It is.
It took me like 4 times to say it, but like, happy International Social Work Day, my fellow social worker. I'm very proud of you.
Yay! Thank you for all that you do. Thank all the social workers and amazing humans.
Yeah, whenever you called me or whenever I called you earlier, I was literally asleep on my couch. So that's how I'm making the world a better place, by napping on my couch and going out with conservatives.
This is going to be an interesting year for you. I just feel that momentum is building.
The amount of absurdity that has already happened to me this year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's March.
And it's March. Are we at the 2-year anniversary of COVID already? Or is that
we've already passed the 2-year anniversary of COVID? And I want to acknowledge that tomorrow is the 1-year anniversary since the Atlanta shootings, where 6 Asian women and 2 other women were shot and killed in massage parlors. That was a premeditated attack. I haven't heard anything in terms of court dates or anything about the perpetrator, but another Asian woman was caught on video being punched in the head over 100 times by a guy that followed her into a building, screamed Asian cuss, then said a cuss word, and then just repeatedly punched her, shoved her, kicked her, spat on her. So this isn't good.
No.
And then on top of that, there was an interview with an Asian resident in Brooklyn who was spewing so much anti-Blackness.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, this is all a nightmare.
Yeah, just everything coming together. Certainly want to highlight Asian hate because it is for real, and definitely sending so much love and support to Asian people. Women and elders are especially vulnerable. It's such a scary time.
It is. But like, it also made me so upset whenever I saw that Brooklyn resident on a news segment just saying, yeah, it's all people of a certain color. It's all Black men. No, it's not.
Right.
Most of the reported hate crimes are white dudes. No one says that. It's just another way to perpetuate anti-Blackness, and it's another symptom of white supremacy, and it just makes me so like, because like nothing, it feels like nothing can be done about this. We try as hard as we can, we talk about it, we have data that supports it, and yet it feels like white supremacy is winning.
Yeah, I mean, white supremacy by everything in our society is set up to win. So even if everything doesn't go the white supremacist way, more than likely they're gonna win, because literally everything is pointing in that direction.
It's like white supremacy. Okay, just thought of this, but it's like white supremacy is Regina George from Mean Girls, spreading the burn book. Like, there was nothing in that burn book about Regina George until she put that in there. But then it caused all of that like chaos and girls beating up on each other, and she wasn't even directly involved.
Yep. I think that's a perfect analogy. That is what is happening.
White supremacy is Regina George, everyone.
Yeah, just not understanding how your racism against spewing hate and racism against Black people is furthering into what is causing Asian hate right now. Just not understanding the link between those and how crucial that is to understanding to really move forward.
Like, we literally talked about this in Acho's book, where that one person was asking, I think it was like chapter 5 or something, where they were just like, well, if Black people hate like Latino people hate Asian people hate Black people, it's just a constant like cycle. And how do we do this? We've already had discussions about this, but what are some practical ways we can immediately stop this? I was talking to I'm just gonna go out there. I was talking about this with my dad, and his answer was more police, and I was like, no.
Oh, no. And Mikki actually talks about that. She talks about how we need to change it from response to chaos cannot be more violence, which is exactly what you get with police. I will ask you a question though, because to answer the question that you just asked that I did not answer. But anyway, I've heard backlash when it comes to like, we need to interchange police for like social workers and counselors, mental health professionals. And what I've heard is like, oh, so then what are we supposed to do? Have no police and all social workers? You know, kind of sarcastically, like, what are we going to do without police? I'm curious, have you heard that? What's your take on that?
I have heard that, and my answer would be, it wasn't Kendi that said this. Who was it that said this? It was another writer, and I can't remember, and I'm going to look up the quote, and it's going to hit me at 3 a.m. while I'm making another grilled cheese. I swear. But they were just like, the answer looks a lot like what white suburbs looks like without police. It's access to clean water, it's access to healthy food, it's access to community centers and community programming, and you don't need a huge freaking police force in these affluent suburbs. Like, I grew up in a very affluent suburban neighborhood, and our police force was like in charge of like tracking down people that stole Amazon packages off of porches. Like, people drove like golf carts around the neighborhood, that kind of like quiet suburban neighborhood. Like, I forgot who it was that said that, but I remember reading it and I was just like, that makes so much sense. If we were to actually invest money into things like schools, programming, programs for the arts, sports clubs, like actual things that helped people, you don't need police because people are actually satisfied with their lives and not wanting to cause harm to anyone else as a result of complex trauma.
I love that answer. It like ties, it makes so much sense to me, because like when people say stuff like that, I'm like, I roll my eyes, but I don't have a response. No, I have a response. But it also ties so perfectly into Mikki's point where she says that if you've got after school activities or you've got like rec leagues, then not only are more at-risk youth involved, but it teaches healthy living patterns. So I think, I didn't even think about that. It's so practical.
It's so practical, and it draws a huge parallel to what we're seeing. We're seeing defunding of public school education. We're seeing defunding of libraries. We're seeing defunding of community centers. Like, they're operating on these shoestring budgets. And then we're seeing police forces that have access to tanks.
Yeah.
It's completely the opposite of what we're trying to achieve here. It makes me want to throw something.
I definitely think we need to look at what our goals are, because Mikki talks about in the second chapter that I read, Hunger, she talks about how any public housing or public aid programs, they don't really help with poverty. And so if that's our goal, to actually help people who are in poverty, then the goal is not being obtained. So if our goal is safe communities, safe neighborhoods, the goal is not met. The way to achieve the goal is, I mean, as you said, the more investment, which goes back to defund the police.
Here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that these social programs that we have for housing, mental health, community clinics, access to clean water, access to affordable, healthy eating, no food deserts, things like this, we're half-assing it. And we're whole-assing police force. If we were to whole-ass something like social programs, there's no telling what we could do with it.
But certainly our goal, I mean, our money is being placed where our goal is. Our goal is for more, what do they say, like law and order, as opposed to actual anything positive. So that's why more money is going to the police force than investment in communities. And it ties so perfectly into this, like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you figure it out. But as we can see, that is not working.
Like, law and order is not equity. Like, law and order is exactly what it is. Law and order. It doesn't guarantee a quality of life. So what's the friggin' point? Sorry. Just, yeah, here we go. Just over here. We're fine.
It's so frustrating. I mean, it feels so clear, and you've got like the top minds working towards this, but yet they're working towards a system as opposed to being open to change and really keeping your eyes open and seeing that this isn't working. They're like feeding more into the system that is not working.
Yeah. Didn't the Biden administration mention something about rolling back the COVID protocols, like free testing, like supplementary income for those impacted by COVID, like protections for unemployment? Yeah, they're rolling back that program, but we have a ton of money for military.
Yeah,
it's chill.
It's the priorities. I mean, honestly, I didn't expect fantastic things from Biden just because he's a more conservative Democrat, but I certainly have been disappointed with some of his decisions just as a Democrat in general. But I guess that's partially on me for believing in a Democrat.
That's partially on, I would say that it's partially on us for believing in the current system that we have.
Which is, yeah, unfortunate. I remember in grad school, probably second semester, our professor was talking about how there was a time where we weren't so polarized. Like Republicans would vote for things that Democrats would propose, and then likewise, and it was actually for the best for the country. And now it's so money based and capitalist based, and it has nothing to do with constituents whatsoever.
It's crazy because like I was talking to one of my friends who grew up in Ireland and the UK yesterday. Yeah, I have to call people whenever I walk to the grocery store, and so that I make sure that there's a witness in case I get punched in the face now. My grocery store is 10 blocks. So like great things. So I was on the phone with them because they were the ones that happened to be free whenever I was going to the grocery store. And I was talking about how I would be considered very left of left, like left of left field for like my political ideals. And they were just like, really? You don't seem like that left of left. And I was just like, well, you come from a place with universal health care. And because I believe in universal health care, I'm considered left of left.
Yes, that is unfortunately very radical in this country.
And we got into this whole conversation about like, well, you know, here we just like, even if you're like super, super conservative, you still believe in like universal healthcare. And I was like, that's the difference, friend.
That would be, wouldn't that be so nice to live in a place like that?
And like people talk about how like, okay, universal healthcare, universal housing, like supplementary income, things like that. These programs are not good. And I'm thinking it's because we don't fund them.
Yeah, they were never meant to be. And that's really hard to wrap your head around. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. If there was actually some focus into it, then it could be something really fantastic.
It makes me want to literally just like chew my microphone right now, because the other argument against social programming is, well, if you just give all this stuff to people, they're not going to want to work. Who said the goal of life was to work?
Yeah, first thing that comes to my mind is you don't work, you don't eat, which comes from the Bible, our favorite book. But then also, I mean, that's why I really think we need to refocus. We really need to figure out what is it that we want? What are human rights? Like, are we supposed to be working 40-hour weeks every week? No. And capitalism has us so like brainwashed that we think that's the goal.
Like, you know, honestly, back when humanity was still in its infancy and we were still getting eaten by like ice age saber-toothed tigers, and like our biggest goal was to band together to survive, you know, that kind of, I think we kind of had something there. Everyone pitched in, everyone got to eat. There was no wealthier hierarchy because money is a construct. We were just trying to not get eaten by saber-toothed tigers.
And we were doing it together.
Exactly. Because you will get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger if you are out there alone. Humans are not meant to be able to pull themselves up by their bootstraps by themselves.
It's just not possible. Oh my gosh. I've been thinking about this a lot because March Madness is upon us and I love March Madness. But like the thing about March Madness and like conference tournaments is that the lower seeds, they have to fight really, really hard. Like literally everything is against them in order for there to be a Cinderella story. And we like as a society love that in people. Everything is against them, but yet we've got all of these success stories. There really aren't that many. And so people look at the random success stories that just so happen to make it and they're like, see, it can be done. But should we have everything against us? Like, does it have to be that way in the first place?
Just because it could be done, should it have been done? Like, one of the first things that comes to my mind is the Olympian Simone Biles. I said that right?
Yeah.
Okay. I was like, wait, is that it? was that her last name? And I was
Yeah.
like, wait a second, it's not that far. But they talk about how she overcame all of this stuff in order to be like a top global athlete. And I'm like, she should not have had to overcome what she overcame. Stop glamorizing hardships in life. Like, because I think as a society, we also glamorize trauma a lot.
Yeah.
Like, could you have been the person that you were if you didn't have to go through all of that? No, I probably wouldn't be in therapy right now if I didn't have to go through all that.
Yeah, that reminds me. I think it was a TikTok, and you probably sent it to me. This lady, she goes, people say, oh, but be thankful that you went through what you went through. It makes you who you are. And she goes, I don't like who I am. And I just feel that so hard. I mean, I'm a very optimistic person, and I definitely at one point would have been like, oh, but here's the silver lining. And now I'm just like, no, like what's traumatic, what's awful, what's hard, what's frustrating is that there is no silver lining. It just is what it is.
Like, well, it's like what you said earlier. It all comes down to, what is human rights? What do we deserve as humans? What do all humans universally deserve as a right? And I think that the right to like feel fulfilled and like be not hungry, not starving, not unhoused, not like not being able to like function healthily in everyday society and community, like those seem to be like very obvious human rights to me. But people think that you need to pay for it, or people think that you don't deserve that. What do we deserve?
Right. Yeah. It's just gotta be very, it takes a reflection of society, because I think living in the greatest country in the world, oh, well, that's interesting because we don't have universal health care. So everybody can't afford to live healthy. Or we don't have universal housing. We don't even have a minimum wage. So as a capitalist society that caters to wealth, that caters to money, caters to productivity, it's interesting that a minimum wage, which is a very integral part of that, is something that we're struggling with right now. Do we even really care about productivity?
It's not even minimum wage. It's a livable wage.
Yeah.
We don't have a livable wage. And like what you said was true. Yeah, there is a national minimum wage, but that doesn't apply to people in the service industry.
Which has always been wild to me. It's a job. Why would you not have a minimum wage? It's a job.
I want to chew on tinfoil. Like, it makes me want to literally like bite through a shard of glass.
Yes, it is quite a mess.
And I love what Kendall says in here, that like that the biggest indicator of violence, it's not race, it's poverty.
Yeah. And I think 3 of our 4 books have pointed that out. which is what I love. One of the things I love about your original point, in terms of how, like, if we don't have more police, what do we do? Because if it's poverty, which is the single greatest indicator of crime, what if we took care of people? What if we invested in people? What if we invested in communities? Then there's no struggle with poverty, there's less crime, and it's fantastic for everybody.
Like, I'm thinking back to the guy that was arrested for punching the Asian woman over 100 times in the head. His dad was quoted in the news saying, my son has mental health issues. They just and the system has failed them. They have mental health issues. And so like it makes me also think, if we treated mental health and poverty as a correlative issue, as an issue that comes like works hand in hand, because I'm very open about my mental health issues. I struggle a lot with anxiety and depression, and like I have been very privileged for the 10 plus years since my diagnosis to have been able to get help, to get medication, to get therapy, to like have a community of people that support me. What if everyone had this? Because I clearly do not live in poverty. I do not have the stressors of that, but poverty is also a huge indicator of mental health.
Yeah. Yeah, it may have been Emmanuel Acho. It may have been Mikki Kendall. I'm confusing books, but they definitely said there's a large percentage specifically about Black Americans. There's a large percentage at some point, a lot of people are going to deal with anxiety because of the social stressors of being a Black or a brown person in America. And then, you know, all the other things that happen in life. And then if you add on the fact that your life is harder because of your race, I mean, we are not meant to handle that.
No, we're not. And honestly, if there isn't just blanket mental health, comprehensive mental health coverage, even after this pandemic, I'm going to throw something through a window. Because this has been freaking traumatic. I'm going to get on a soapbox now. This has been freaking traumatic for all of us. It has done nothing but increase the wage gap, increase like the inequitable like society that we already live in. We have billionaires going to space, for crying out loud, and we still have people that don't have access to clean drinking water. We have people who don't have access to healthy food, meals, medication, and they have every single right to life as the rest of us. And yet we are still rather be funding people going to space. So
I'm glad you mentioned healthcare, because Kendall talks about how, and I should probably pull up the quote, but she definitely talks about how when we're determining, how do I want to say this? When we're determining I'm gonna look it up.
Do it. Like, it's wild to me. There's a social worker that I love to follow on Instagram. And their handle is Trust Me, I'm a Social Worker. I've mentioned them before. It's Megan Torres. She often talks about the health disparities between Black women and other women whenever it comes to how they are treated at hospitals. Like, healthcare isn't even equitable. There's no blanket coverage. The fact that it made news headlines that there was an illustration of a Black pregnant woman in a medical, like there was a medical illustration of that, and a baby like in the womb, a Black baby in the womb, and that was considered like radical and just completely new. It's 2022 that we don't have like representation in medical textbooks like that we don't even have equitable health care for people, like for everyone in this country, is just so absurd to me, because we make up this country.
Yes. Specifically about that bulletin, I mean, this is the one where they say like the least safe place for a baby is in a Black woman's stomach. I feel like that was it. And I mean, just, I hope I don't have to explain to people how hurtful that is. To see, like, how did that get past so many people as, oh, this is a good idea, let's do this. But I'm going to turn it back to healthcare so we don't just like soak on that.
Yeah, this is a podcast and we were just staring at each other for a few seconds.
So Mikki says research shows that things like exercise, fresh produce, clean water, clean air, and access to healthcare are all major factors in good health. And I just thought that was really interesting because clean air and then access to healthcare, things that our government has control over in terms of pollution. There could be some type of regulation for big companies, but there is none. Interesting. And healthcare. We could have universal healthcare. And I mean, I read it from here, but I've certainly seen the research too. These are all major factors in good health. So do we really care about the health of people? I think our actions say no.
Our actions, our infrastructure, the way our society is built says no. And I also think about like boutique gyms and really fancy things like that, like how expensive it is to maintain a quote unquote healthy lifestyle between that and nutrition. Like, and I go to spin class probably 3 to 4 times a week and I pay for it, and that is an immense privilege that I have. And like the fact that we don't have like access to free regular like exercise equipment. Of course, people can always say like, oh, you can go on a run, but like personally, as a woman, I feel safer going to my gym and being in a secure location to do that. I have had so many friends who said that they have feared for themselves while out running in just down the block because of catcallers, because of cars, because of dogs, because of what have you. So technically you can't exercise safely for free, and that puts more stress on your brain. I'm gonna like low-key praise my birth country of China for a second right now. But they had free outdoor park space gyms.
Ooh.
Just out
I love that.
People were able to use this exercise equipment for free. Ooh. And they were in parks. And it came with like safety stuff. And I noticed that sometimes if you go on really fancy college campuses, they'll have like free water fountains. They will have like benches and gym equipment and things like that on running trails. And if you think about a college campus, like that's also like its own small little society, little tiny city in there, like the campus living and learning center or whatever it's called. They have clinicians there, they have mental health care there, like you have food provided. It's like if you have a scholarship or a full ride to college, you're taken care of for 4 years. And your only worries and stress are related to your studies. And even university is a friggin' privilege in this country.
That's a major privilege. What I like about the outdoor area, workout area, is that it's outside. I mean, one of my problems with the gym is that I'm like in a closed area. In pandemic times, I mean, at our gym, I'm in there and maybe out of like 40 people, there are like 3 of us wearing masks right now. So in a pandemic, I like in general, I like being outside. So if there's like a nice little workout space, for sure. But I mean, like when I used to jog outside, it hurts my knees. Like a treadmill's nicer on my knees. But that's like, I did the math. That's like, and I got the cheaper membership because I'm quite frugal. I think it's like $160 a year. And I mean, you're living paycheck to paycheck trying to pay your bills. There's no way you can afford $160. I mean, you could do so much with that money.
Like, it's so insane. And like, even if you have a quote unquote regular 9-to-5 job, yeah, they have a couple of incentives. One of my jobs one time that I worked 9 to 5 gave a $200 a month bonus if you proved that you worked out at least 12 times a month. So it was an incentive. But at the same time, that same job ran me so ragged that I was not about to like go after work to go work out.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you brought that up because I've been listening. One of the podcasts I love, Balanced Black Girl, they were talking about changing the relationship with fitness. And so what I've noticed is if I'm in like in a good, stable place, then I'll be like, oh, okay, I can add a jog onto this. But if I'm in a community, if I'm in like a situation where I'm working 12 hours a day, I'm like barely sleeping, I'm not in any way like on a consistent routine, I'm not exercising. So like that pool where you're like, oh, but I have the incentive, so I have to exercise, it can become very toxic, a very toxic relationship with fitness for sure.
It all goes back to capitalism. We're fine. We complain about this all week, every week. It's fine. It is fine. like also just like going another part of just gun violence and hunger. I love how they're just one after the other.
Yes.
Because like people, I don't think people really recognize how hunger is also violence on the body. Like you think violence towards a human body, okay, you think a gun, yeah, that's obvious violence. But hunger is something that is so insidious and just creeps up on you, and that people don't realize is also violence. Has anyone ever talked about like forced famines?
No, I think that's a fantastic point. I mean, and specifically both of these, but certainly hunger, we can do something about, just like the powers that be have not yet. But I just love Mikki's perspective on this. Like you can't copy it. She's been hungry. She's like been a victim of gun violence. And so her take on it is just absolutely incredible.
Like, I think Kendall is just such an amazing just person, like author and writing aside, just being an amazing person. But it also goes back to she should not have had to go through this in order to get her thoughts into a book.
Was there anything from either, we'll start with gun violence. Was there anything that stood out to you from that chapter?
Once again, I just love like always going back to the idea of, okay, gun violence, what are the root causes of it? And whenever people say poverty and not being able to trust in your own safety and trying to have that semblance of control of your life and like safety and control over your life and safety over the ones that you love, like that is going to be the biggest driving factor of gun violence. Like I just don't think that that's iterated enough. Because like low key, why did humanity, the human race, create weapons? It's so we wouldn't get eaten by saber-toothed tigers, people. And then we started using them on each other. But like originally it was saber-toothed tigers. And probably mammoths. I don't know.
It was some form of hunting for sure. And then it changed from animals to people.
Yeah.
An interesting perspective that she brought into it, I thought, was that she talks about how guns in conflict automatically escalate any type of conflict. So she's like, you can have an argument. She talks about her past abusive relationship, and it's elevated automatically if somebody has a gun.
I think the statistics on how many off-duty officers are involved in domestic violence with their partners, and those people have access to guns.
Yeah. You just think about the type of person, and this might get very touchy, but you think about the type of person who wants to be a cop. You think about the person who wants to be a police officer. Sure, there are great people out there who are cops. Sure, there are great people who want to be police officers, but overwhelmingly, it feels like people who have this control, who want the power of being a police officer, want the power of having of having the power over people, telling them what to do, what not to do. So you see this like play out in their role as a police officer, in their relationships, just like very controlling, and it's very abusive and dangerous.
It is. Like whenever you say like the whole like the situation gets escalated so many times if there is a gun involved, it reminds me of West Side Story. So there were just knife fights and they would just punch each other, and then all of a sudden you have one single gun that is brought into the story, and it just gets completely like there's an entire number in that movie. It's an incredible movie, but like there's an entire number in that movie where they're fighting over the gun, and you are on the edge of your seat going, is this thing going to get used? Is it going to accidentally go off? Someone's going to die, even though you know the ending and you know someone's going to die. But the suspense and the anxiety you feel just from a gun being brought on the set.
You can feel it in a musical. You can certainly feel it in real life. It just gets very, very tense.
Yeah. Like, I come from Texas, okay? I'm from Texas. Gun happy Texas. And I get anxious whenever I see guns. I get so anxious. So whenever there are politicians out there shooting their Christmas cards with guns, I'm sitting there going like, you just handed that to an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
Like the amount of accidental shootings that happen where guns are not secured, where people who should not have guns are able to access them. It's just the whole thing. It's a flying metal projectile that can kill you.
I think the regulation too on guns is appalling, to say the least. Like, it's harder to get an abortion than a gun. So just like let that sink in. Concerning, we're talking about hood feminism, we're talking about gun violence. It is harder to get an abortion. That is crazy to me.
I'm gonna go throw something out of a window now. It's fine. We're fine. Like, of all the things that the government is so hard on regulating, the Florida government just passed the Don't Say Gay bill. These anti-trans bills that are being passed in, like, I think I saw one in Iowa, Texas for sure. Might be Ohio. I don't know. I'll double check these. But like all of this legislation over policing education, book banning, and yet it is easier to access guns than it is to get a copy of 1984 in a Florida school.
Yeah. I think you brought up something really important with that, the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida, which is like, oh, it's so frustrating. But Mikki talks about, I thought I had it pulled up. She talks about how we need to normalize understanding that hate speeches are not, they're harmless regardless of who it targets or who says it. Just understanding the power of our words, the power, like hate speeches are not, like she said, harmless. There are real consequences for how we talk about different vulnerable populations. There are consequences. There are going to be consequences for that Florida legislation and all those anti-trans legislation that's trying to get passed now. Like, it's not, I don't know if people don't think about the consequences or they don't care, but there are real consequences for already vulnerable populations.
People that don't understand that legislation being passed is going to equate to lives lost down the road, and it already has probably contributed to it. Like, the fact that people can't draw that conclusion just baffles me. And it is a huge place of privilege to be like, it's just a law, it doesn't affect me, or I don't have to worry about my humanity being erased because I'm not the one that's under attack. Whereas there are actual lives at stake whenever we talk about abortion bans, when we talk about anti-trans legislation. Like, if you value humanity and human lives, then what the heck are we doing?
Because our actions speak to, it shows the fact that that law can be passed. I mean, I'm hopeful that there's definitely pushback, but I've seen, like, you saw it a lot when Trump was in office about how, like, they took it to the courts and it was overturned. I'm hoping that that's going to be the case with that law. But the fact that they're even able to, that legislators got together, created it, and tried to pass it, I mean, that's extremely damaging and dangerous. And to me, that says we don't really care about people.
We care about telling people what to do. We don't care about people. And yet we still have issues like gun violence and hunger.
So moving to hunger, was there anything that stood out to you there in that chapter?
Just hunger in general. Like, I have never personally experienced what it means to be hungry, and just going back to the concept of intersectional feminism, how hunger is a feminist issue because it affects women.
Yes.
Period. It's a feminist issue because it affects women. I personally haven't ever had to worry about food going into my stomach, but hunger is an issue that I need to care about because it affects women. And if I care about women, boom. Like, I remember learning the term food desert whenever I was in late high school. I had volunteered for Eco Club, and we went to a fun little sustainable, like, farm setup on the outside of town. It was so cute. And they taught sustainable farming techniques, and they had this concept called the Veggie Ban that drove all of their produce into food deserts. And what a food desert is it's where people don't have access to fresh, healthy produce, like within, I want to say, a 10-mile radius, which I think that's a very conservative estimate, because if you don't have a car and you don't live within walking distance of a grocery store that has fresh, healthy produce, you're stuck. Yeah. So people can have access to food, but if they don't have access to healthy food, that increases their risk of diabetes. It increases their risk of heart failure, of COPD, of, like, just long lists of ailments and issues.
And one thing that she brought up that I thought was really interesting was, you might have the access, like, you might have, maybe there's community transportation and it could take you to the nearest store and they have fresh produce, but if it's expensive, then you can't afford it and there's no point in it even being there. Which, I mean, I believe that access to healthy produce should definitely be a human right, but apparently some people disagree.
And there's also, like, legislation about, like, what kinds of produce certain people can even, like, farm themselves. That's regulated.
Wow.
I forgot where it was, but certain GMO crops have, like, copyrights on them that farmers cannot keep extra seeds or whatever in order to, like, keep growing food or trade food. In, like, subsistence farming or sustainable stuff, like community gardens, there are regulations, and that makes me want to throw something too, because like, so the agricultural revolution
It's like, what is the point of regulation on what people grow on their own land, in their own property? Like, it's like, none of capitalism makes sense to me, but that feels ridiculous.
This is fine. The reason you don't hear about like self-sustaining communities is because laws and regulations and, dare I say, capitalism makes it impossible to have a large-scale self-sustaining community like that. And people have tried it. Unfortunately, some of those people have also turned it into cults. But like,
but still tried it.
I'm not advocating for cults. No, that is not what I'm saying here.
But with all the regulations that seem, and I am also not advocating cults, but with all the regulations, if I would understand why people want to be like, no, I don't want government in this. Like, I don't want them to have anything to do with this because the regulations are ridiculous.
It's just, there is so much in this web of crap that you don't even know where to start, where to untangle. I feel like we run into this question every single time we talk is, where are the solutions? How do we do it? One of my friends who studies anthropology literally says humanity needs a reset button all the time.
I think what Mikki is saying is the feminist movement has to acknowledge these things, has to push for these, and I would hope that there would be a push for this, even if it wasn't a feminist issue, because we're talking about gun violence and we're talking about hunger. And one of the quotes that Mikki said, she said, because you think about gun violence, you think about like inner city, maybe like a Chicago. And she was like, it's not just a Chicago problem, it's an America problem, which could take me in a whole nother tailspin, but I'm not going to go there. But I think what Mikki is saying, the feminist movement, you have to push for this, like you push for equal pay, like you push for the access to abortion. Like, it can't be just what privileged women, specifically privileged white women, have access to. It's got to be, it's got to be all of these things.
Which brings me back to because here's the thing, we can't even get equal pay at this point. Like, even the white feminist issues aren't being pressed right now. That's the thing.
It makes me think about, and this might be like on its own, like maybe it's like a little related, but it makes me think about how people will do things like, what will they do? They'll do like programs at churches for the homeless, or they'll do like random, very small things that are great, like fantastic things. Like they'll do, if we're talking about hunger, then maybe a church will do like a program once a month to help feed the hungry. And it just makes me I'm glad that they're doing it, but it makes me so mad because it's like, it's not on us to do things like this. This is a more widespread thing. It's got to be handled in policy on the macro level. It shouldn't be on us to it shouldn't be on us. I was trying to think of an example, but I try not to get like too specific in case it's somebody's situation, but it shouldn't be on us to do our thing. It should be on the macro level if it affects a wide group of people.
It makes me think that this is like social dialysis when it needs a kidney transplant.
That's exactly it. So for us, we can continue to do our things, we can give. I try to give to local organizations, and I really believe in the community upbringing, but it's got to be on the macro level. So that's when we get into like voter suppression and gerrymandering, and also people voting and people running for office is so much.
Yep, because like if you don't have access to safety, healthy food, or even like enough rest because you're overworked, you're not running for office.
Yeah. You're probably not even really worried because you're doing your daily thing, just trying to survive because of capitalism.
That's exactly like why I am such a huge fan of all of these grassroots candidates who have come from just a plethora of backgrounds. There is a candidate running for House in Pennsylvania right now who danced through college, I think, to be able to like make ends meet and things like that. And I don't want to accidentally like misrepresent this person. But I'm pretty sure the whole campaign is all volunteer, all grassroots, no big corporate sponsorships. And I'm just like, yes.
I love it. Because then that's who AOC talks about, that you're accountable to the community. They literally put you in office. You're not accountable to whatever big lobbyist firm gave you so much money.
Yep.
So I will look for them, and certainly, I mean, least I could do is like tag their social media. Yes. I don't live there, so I can't vote for them.
No, but I am connected to someone that is running PR for their campaign, so I will send you their profile.
Yes, please do. And we see more of that, so there is hope.
There is hope.
I feel like every race there's at least one person who's grassroots funded, which I love.
I am unfortunately just personally so impatient that instead of like slowly chipping away at the statue, I rather take a wrecking ball to it. That's just my personal style.
And I mean, what we're asking for are like basic human rights, and also should have been guaranteed the second any human was really born. So I don't mind impatience because it's been a while.
It's been a hot second. We're fine. This is fine. We are slowly working towards the society and the world that we want. Unfortunately, the powers that be are inhibiting a lot of it.
But that's why we just kick them out.
Yep. And that's why we create this podcast and create conversations and empower other women and other leaders and other people to be who they are and step up and lead the way that they can. Yep.
That's why we're here. Oh, that was so sweet.
Well, I'm very grateful for you as always.
Yes, me as well, grateful for you and this platform. This is always just such a stress reliever, honestly, every time we record.
I think it's also part of because I scream a lot during it and I groan a lot. So like that is like there is a yoga pose called like screaming lion or something, or roaring lion or something like that, where you literally like turn your face and go like ah! And like it's supposed to like relieve stress. So I think I'm doing my own version of that by all of the fun little sound effects that I do in this. And it is very stress relieving.
Shout out to yoga. Yeah, it's fantastic. Whatever it is, it's working and I am not mad at it.
Well, I am very grateful for you. Thank you. Happy International Women's Month or Women's History Month. Happy International Social Work Day. Very proud to know you.
Thank you. I'm thankful for you and all that you do. Also, happy days. Definitely want to celebrate as much as we can because so much is happening.
Exactly. I will see you next week.
Bye.